I am Liz Weber. I am a content specialist with the Chicago Community Trust, and I live in the Edgewater neighborhood in Chicago.
Hi, I am Lauren Woods. I am a program manager on the Building Collective Power team, and I live in South Shore.
All right, Lauren, you ready to talk about how we got to see each other's neighborhoods last week?
Yes, it was exciting.
It was. And I will say this, I've never been to South Shore.
Really?
Ever. Yeah, and I've lived in Chicago for over a decade.
Oh, well, I'm glad that I was able to help usher you into a new neighborhood. I have been through Edgewater a few times, but I got to see it in a different way, just walking up Broadway.
You know, we intentionally sought out corner stores that, are kind of all-encompassing for people, right? And they were very different experiences, I should say. Do you want to talk a little bit about yours first in South Shore? Because I think that's where we kind of started to see a lot of the disparity when people talk about disinvestment, on the South Side.
We happened to walk into a Family Dollar, which is just down the street from the Walgreens, and another kind of commercial store that provides some of those consumer needs for residents in South Shore. Compared to the experience in Walgreens and Edgewater was significantly different. There were marked differences in that there were not a lot of products on the shelf, which to me is indicative of the fact that residents need the products that are being sold, and there are not many stores that are providing those consumer needs. And so there's a high concentration or traffic of consumers that are purchasing from that store. And then we saw as we were walking through the aisle, the inability to really walk through the aisle because there was so much product that was stacked waiting to be shelved. What did you see that was different? Because I know that was a marked difference in our experience in both of those stores.
Yeah, when we went in your neighborhood, the thing that struck me initially, and you've already kind of hit on that, is just how unwelcoming the experience was. Sometimes people don't realize when you're consumers, when you walk into a store, everything from where things are placed to the lighting to the music it's all about marketing, right? It's all about your experience, and you may not recognize that as a consumer. You may just day to day take for granted, the fact that if you live in an area where it's a more welcoming experience, right? You take a lot of those things for granted, like a better parking lot, better lighting. But I could just immediately feel it when I was in South Shore with you, with the group, and it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, if I were to ever come here, it'd have to be in and out.
In the situation with South Shore, both the Family Dollar and the Walgreens are necessary for the community. And so as a consumer, you might negotiate, will I complain about these things today because I know that this is the only place I can go to meet this consumer need? So it's just something you feel like you have to deal with. And thinking about stores, one of the things that we both did is go to a grocery store in our neighborhood. Now, we were able to go to a grocery store in South Shore, but I would love to hear how you experienced that grocery store, and then I can tell you a little bit about what I know about the local market.
So in the one that we went to in the South Shore, I thought was a really nice grocery store, and had a lot of options. It has a lot of things that you would shop for. I could see something like that being in Edgewater, but the one caveat was, and I know that you had warned us about this, was that there was a section where there were items locked behind cases. We're pointing out the baby formula, and that was just really frustrating to see because it's like, people need baby formula,
Over-the-counter medicines that you should typically freely be able to take from the shelf were behind the counter. And then also as a customer, I don't necessarily want to have to buy, my hard liquor in the same place I'm buying my baby formula. But to your point, the local market is a very beautiful grocery store. You come in and you see very clean and organized produce section. You see a hot bar. There's seating for people who want to stay for the hot bar. I'm a shopper at the local market, and me, like thousands of other residents in South Shore, only can go to the local market because that's the only grocery store in South Shore. And up until 2019, it was a 6-year gap. And so it was a food desert because there was no grocery store. Residents had to organize and mobilize and kind of fight to meet their consumer needs in getting a grocery store in their community. I don't want anybody to ever think that communities that lack resources are satisfied with the deficit. Almost always in communities where there's such a marked lack of resources, there's some neighborhood association, some block club, a few Chicagoans who are coming together that are saying it shouldn't be like this, it doesn't have to be like this, and we're going to do something about it.
You know, that reminds me, and I feel like people have to know this little anecdote when we were in Edgewater. So, you know, like I said, I've been there a decade, but I've not experienced everything in Edgewater. But it's nice to have a fresh, new perspective. So Lauren here, when we were walking down Broadway, she immediately spotted a game shop, spots the shop immediately, and we go in there, and you're just so excited because not only are you enjoying that store, but you're thinking like, who can I bring, you know, here, right? And it makes me wonder, like, how do we support our own neighborhoods, but how do we also go out of our way to support other neighborhoods? Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like how we support one another, I think a toolkit like this is actually helpful because so many people have the desire in their heart to want to do something. We want to get out of there, but sometimes you need an excuse, a roadmap, and a little bit of directions on how to do that. So it makes sense that a person, if they don't have a reason to be in South Shore, will come to South Shore. So I think a toolkit like this is so helpful because it brings foot traffic to neighborhoods that might not receive residents outside of that community were it not for the activity that they were engaged in. So I'm hoping the South Shore was the first time you were there for this activity, that in the summertime you come back when we have concerts and festivals that are happening out of the cultural center, and you'll get a personal invitation from me. I'm hoping that when the community garden really gets going and you just start thinking like, I just want to get out of Edgewater, let me just go someplace else, then you might accept the invitation to hear a blues singer really throw down in the middle of 71st and Merrill or 70th and Merrill. So sometimes, you know, it's easier to go to a place when you feel invited. It's easier to go to a place when you feel welcome. And it's easier to be in a place and stay in a place if your needs are met.
You know, for all that passion that people in my neighborhood have, I would make the argument, can we take that passion and move it to other areas too? So can I influence my fellow residents to go down to South Shore in the summer? I think that strip you took us on 71st Street, that was near the cultural center, that was was it 71st Street? Mm-hmm. That was very walkable, it had bakeries, it had restaurants. There are things to support down there.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. If you don't have the privilege of having a colleague or having an assignment like this, the idea of making friends someplace else could feel like something you're not used to. You need to dust that off. But it's worth it. All that to say, it's worth it. And I do think that if you want to be a real Chicagoan, then you will step outside of your comfort zone and get to know Chicago. And that will be maybe going to neighborhoods where you might not most immediately see how your consumer need is felt, but you 100% will feel the love. You will feel the hope. It looks beautiful. You'll see evidence of how much people care and how much they're invested in the future of that place.
And it really is going out of your way to connect with people outside of your community and doing what we did.
And part of this Disrupting Segregation tour, I hope, allows even Chicagoans to see the possibility and the potential and where we can develop.
So, I think a lot of people who have a passing, knowledge of Chicago's history will know, or they'll have heard that the South Side of Chicago really was kind of the economic engine of the city for a very long time. And, the reality is it's not anymore, but it has so much history. Its history is so rich. Every time I am in the South Side of Chicago and I see something very historic, like a really old building, it makes me really happy. And I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that these areas are so rich in history, and there's so much opportunity to spark that vibrancy again.
I wholeheartedly agree.